American government personnel are drawn to rumors of a wrecked extraterrestrial device. They walk to the desert to see an elderly Hispanic couple who live nearby. The elderly lady shows them her husband, who has been acting oddly. When it's safe, they interrogate the elderly guy. He keeps saying the same thing about rebirth. The individual was entirely blind before regaining his sight. Since there are no viable specimens at the accident scene, the agents remove the old man for additional examination. Meanwhile, David Chamberlain, a mechanic, is dealing with the passing of his wife Jane and the rearing of his teenage daughter Annabelle. His workshop is on the point of going out of business. David needs a job to support his daughter, so he suggests alternatives to his employer, who refuses to listen. Zach, a veteran of the Iran War, begs David for a job, but David is compelled to decline. David goes to a pub in the evening to wash away his sorrows. Zach is there, listening to a report about the Iranian military clash. An alcoholic taunts the soldiers. In the parking lot, a furious Zach brawls with him, but is overpowered. Zach is backed by David, but the struggle ends when Zach's prosthetic limb is severed. David assists Zach by transporting him to the Veterans Rehabilitation Center. He encourages him to avoid arguments, but Zach considers him an idiot, since he doesn't know what it's like to lose everything. At home, Annabelle surprises David with a homemade birthday cake. She informs him that she has left college. David believes she pulled out due to a relationship or some sort of issue, but Annabelle reveals that his last 2 payments did not go through. David pledges to bring the money to Annabelle in a week, but she is concerned about his health. He is concerned about not keeping his commitment to his wife and failing to provide for Annabelle. He stands alone, staring at the watch Annabelle gave him with her final money. David wishes to get drunk, but does not have any alcohol in the house. He goes shopping in the middle of the night. On his walk back, he spots a dazzling ball of light falling from the sky. David is startled and smashes into a ditch. He awakens to the UFO's warmth. The shadow of a familiar figure walks through the trees. He stumbles after the lady. Annabelle realizes in the morning that her father has not returned. She phones the police and requests a search, but the sheriff refuses to proclaim David missing just yet. Annabelle inspects her father's workplace. Ned Wilcox, the proprietor, is clueless. She continues her hunt and comes to her father's wrecked vehicle. She explores the woodland till late at night in search of him. She returns to the car when the flashlight runs out. She breaks down, restarts the car, and looks out the window to see David emerge from the trees. Annabelle drives him to the hospital, where the doctor delivers some startling news to her. David has 2 working kidneys, but he has previously donated one to his wife. His wife's body rejected the kidney, resulting in her passing away. David feels strange as he wakes up. He had visions of his wife waiting for him beside the big tree on the walk home. He sits in the rocker where Jane used to relax. David recalls pursuing a feminine shadow and collapsing close to the meteorite in a crater. The UFO gave out a nice blue light. Thin tentacles sprang from the meteorite when he passed out. Annabelle informs her father at supper that he kept chatting with Jane while he was unconscious. David follows the news of nations attacking the United States. Conflicts scare him because Annabelle will not be safe. A lady suddenly cries out his name. David recognizes his wife and embraces her. Jane presents glimpses of future occurrences to her husband, one of which concerns a nuclear catastrophe. David, having come to his senses, decides not to spend any more time and walks to the garage to write down the plan he has seen. He is persuaded that the aliens are talking with him through his wife and that he must respond to their call to save Annabelle. Meanwhile, the spies debate the significance of alien artifacts with their boss. They think that the extraterrestrial stones can permanently halt all war hostilities. The boss opposes their suggestions, since wars are vital for the country's economy. Agent Stipe subsequently discovers that the extraterrestrial specimens discovered did not survive. Since locating new living specimens may take a long time, the agent instructs the professor to do an autopsy on the old Mexican. Stipe fabricates a viral narrative to explain his demise. He believes that one sacrifice is little in comparison to the thousands of warriors. The next day, David digs through his wife's old car, only to unearth terrible memories. Annabelle sits alone and watches family footage from happier times, because she misses her mother. Meanwhile, in the rehabilitation facility, Zach and a veteran, Jim O'Malley, discuss wartime battles. Despite his amputations, Jim is determined to fight for his nation. Zach has had his fill of warfare. The system abandoned him once he grew unsuitable as a combatant. His military achievements were meaningless, and everyone regarded him as a cripple. Strangely, David shows up at the rehabilitation center to offer him a job. They both drive towards the woods. They arrive at the crash site. David instructs Zach to use the winch and discovers the object is surrounded by tall grass, which wasn't that tall yesterday. Zach draws his fingers away, sensing something coming from the meteorite. With David gone, Annabelle sorts through her mother's belongings to donate or take to the barn. She believes that this will help them cope with their loss. Annabelle says her father still blames himself for his wife's demise. This does not sit well with David. He treasures every recollection he has of Jane. He has no intention of pretending she never existed to get on with his life. Zach awakens in the middle of the night with excruciating pain in his severed leg. He tells Jim about it the next day, but his pal is certain it's only phantom pains. Later the next morning, all of the patients at the rehabilitation center come out to protest the dispatch of conscripts to the front lines of the Afghan occupation. Civilians, on the other hand, are opposed to the anti-war demonstration. One of the locals spits in O'Malley's face, labeling him a traitor. He attempts to strike him, but slips out of his wheelchair. Zach also falls, as a result of new burning leg agony. All demonstrators disperse when the cops come. David inspects the meteorite and sees that the thing deteriorates in the sunlight. When his temperature climbs and fluid seeps from his leg, an anguished Zach breaks into David's residence and demands an explanation. David notices that his lost limb is growing back. David realizes that the meteorite that was delivered to Earth can heal everyone who comes into contact with it. As he walks away, he asks Hannibal to keep an eye on his friend. Agent Stipe is also notified about a fourth extraterrestrial arrival. Zach has dreams about the day he was injured in battle. As he wakes up, he is startled to see Hannibal. David comes in the evening and begs his daughter to assist him in carrying Zach to the barn. He places him near the meteorite and uses cooling gas to chill the extraterrestrial item. Instantly, slender tentacles come out and encircle Zach's arm. His missing limb grows quickly into a healthy leg. Hannibal falls after inadvertently touching the extraterrestrial artifact. Her mother summons David in her nightmares. David couldn't bring himself to see his ailing wife when a donor's kidney was denied, so Hannibal was the adult who consoled her mother in her last days. She awakens in the morning and watches in astonishment as an exuberant Zach walks on both legs. Zach and Hannibal marvel at what transpired the night before. Later, they discover David in the barn, finalizing a picture of an odd pod. He claims that the design is intended to keep the meteorite safe. Hannibal is worried about her father's new preoccupation, but he wants her to believe him. Zach notes that the building will need a large number of steel plates. David discovers his high school friend Tony unconscious in a pub. Afterward, with Zach's assistance, he takes his office keys. The pair then steals the required goods, as well as a cement mixer truck. They then proceed to an abandoned factory. Stipe and other agents arrive at the meteorite crash site in the woods and discover just minor shards of the meteorite. According to Sheriff Williams, David Chamberlain crashed his automobile near the scene a few days earlier. Scientists make a startling finding after investigating meteorite pieces. The item is a transporter of diverse plant and animal DNA strands, including human DNA. When David and Zach work on the meteorite's protective capsule, Hannibal pays a visit to her mother's grave at the cemetery. She admits to having unfavorable thoughts about her father and that she cannot forgive him every time he fails to live up to her expectations. As Hannibal resolves to permanently end her painful past by burning her mother's items, the guys complete creating the capsule. The federal agents apprehend her. As David returns home, the agents question him. They inquire about the accident, but he claims he has no recollection of it. Agent Stipe tells him about the strange extraterrestrial object's enormous value to humanity and how it would help cease conflict. But David is dissatisfied with global peace. Later, Stipe reveals that they are aware that he miraculously regrew a kidney. He also shows him an autopsy of the healed old guy. David quickly lies to the agents and leads them to his barn. He admits to keeping the meteorite indoors, but when it was exposed to nature, it melted. Hannibal is concerned that the agents will take him away for tests and urges him to give them what they want before they depart. She believes her father has changed as a result of the meteorite. He is always hallucinating about Jane. David believes the extraterrestrial is using Jane's appearance to warn him of a nuclear tragedy. David is being pursued by the agents. When he notices this, he invites his friend Tony to stand in for him, which confuses the agent. Stipe instructs Agent Lubinsky to use his daughter to pull David out of hiding. Meanwhile, Tony gives him the surveillance footage of David from the night of the break-in. If he does not return what he took, he will fire him. Zach remembers O'Malley while working. Zach returns to the facility to offer his pal a second opportunity. Hannibal arrives and expresses concern about her father's possible abduction by government officials. Zach swears to protect David and introduces her to Jim. They promise him a miracle by showing Jim the growing leg, but his pal declines the assistant. They leave the treatment clinic, disappointed, and are abducted by Stipe's men. Tony finds the abandoned factory. He inspects the construction and requests an explanation. David attempts to comfort his friend, but Tony decides to contact the cops. David lunges at him and knocks him unconscious. David, agitated, enters the capsule and discovers that life is developing. He sees his wife once more. He admits to her that he is undeserving of redemption, which she verifies. The extraterrestrial artifact is meant for Hannibal and Zach, whom David must assist in saving. Stipe, meantime, keeps Hannibal and Zach at David's residence. According to press sources, Russia is ready to deploy nuclear weapons in a fight. Zach's severed limb had grown back, shocking Stipe. He attempts to encourage Zach to utilize the UFO for good. Zach is unconvinced and keeps quiet. Furious, Stipe beats Zach with a stick, so he will confess David's location. David is now in the barn. To hide his traces, he sets them on fire. While the agents rush toward the flames, David breaks into his residence and holds Stipe at gunpoint. Annabelle seizes the opportunity and disarms the agent. The group runs, but Annabelle is intentionally shot to drive David to find the alien and heal his daughter. They get into the car, but Annabelle is bleeding terribly. The notion of losing his final family member terrifies David. The agents track them down to the plant. David lays Annabelle's body next to the meteorite. The gunshot wound, however, never heals. David sobs and begs the alien for assistance, but nothing occurs. As David discovers Annabelle has vanished, he douses the capsule with gasoline and prepares to torch it, but Stipe intervenes. As Annabelle appears, David pulls out the lighter. Stipe shoots David, now that the coast is clear. A firefight breaks out between Zach, David, and the agents, and all of them are injured. Agent Lubinsky, shockingly, shoots Stipe to prevent him from abusing the alien. A massive explosion, and the appearance of a nuclear mushroom in the sky, signal the end. People are watching the end of the world as David assists Zach into the capsule and asks him to look after Annabelle. He apologizes to his daughter for being unable to join them, and shuts the door behind them. Stipe orders David to open the capsule and save them, but the door only opens from the inside. David sees the shadow of his beloved Jane beckoning him home in his final moment. When water begins to flood the capsule, Zach attempts to console Annabelle. Since they're underwater, the alien attaches tentacles to them and keeps them alive. After a long time, the couple wakes up and discovers that the entire world is in ruins. The capsule is overgrown with nature, signifying a new beginning for humankind.